I remember the fog that night like it had settled inside my chest. The trees were nothing more than dark silhouettes, their branches scratching faint patterns against the pale moonlight. Every step I took along the dirt path seemed to echo too loudly, swallowed by the heavy silence that hung in the air. Somewhere close, a faint humming drifted from the shadows, low and insistent, almost like it was calling my name. But I was alone. I had walked this stretch of forest hundreds of times before, but tonight the fog seemed different, alive, curling around me with a slow, deliberate patience. My lantern flickered, casting trembling light across the undergrowth, and I thought I saw shapes move just beyond its glow. I stopped, holding my breath, listening to the rustling of leaves like whispers I couldn't understand. Then, as the fog thickened and the shadows deepened, I heard it, a soft scratching at the base of an old oak. That's when I saw it. And the night would never feel the same again. The trail was forgotten. Branches curled overhead, tangled like ancient fingers. A pale moon spilled across the leaves, thin and uncertain. Fog clung to my clothes. It dampened my hair. Every step made it cling tighter, pressing the night against my skin. The forest was quiet, almost a faint rustle, far off, or perhaps just the wind brushing dry leaves. I couldn't tell. Shapes flickered at the edge of my vision, tall, shifting shadows that didn't belong to any tree I could see. I blinked. They were gone. The path narrowed. The fog grew thicker. It smelled like wet earth and something older, deeper, lurking beneath the roots. I thought I heard a soft voice. My name whispered, just a breath. I froze. The air hummed, vibrating faintly around my chest. The trees leaned closer. Branches arched overhead, forming a low tunnel. Each step sounded muffled. My boots sank slightly in the damp soil. Every footfall echoed inside my skull instead of on the ground. I tried to focus on the trail, on the moonlight spilling between the trunks. But something shifted in the corner of my eye. Something that didn't move like the trees. The fog whispered, or maybe my own thoughts did. I pressed my palms to my cheeks. The cold moisture felt like fingers tugging at my skin. I slowed. The world seemed to stretch. A branch scraped softly against another. A shadow trembled where the moonlight didn't reach. I told myself it was nothing, but the voice returned, closer this time. Breath-like, gentle, like it knew the rhythm of my heart. The air smelled damp, but under it was something metallic, iron, old and cold. A faint hum wrapped around the fog. It wasn't music, not exactly. It was presence. I felt watched, not by one pair of eyes, but many. They lingered in the spaces between the trunks, waiting. A faint glow appeared in the fog, pale and wavering. It hovered, not touching the ground, not moving like anything I knew. I stopped, my breath clouded in front of me. I tried to hold still. It watched, and I watched it back. The fog swirled around my ankles. Every movement made it coil and pull at my clothes. I could feel its weight pressing downward. Soft footsteps, mine or not mine, tapped somewhere just beyond the light. Each step slow, deliberate. Every rustle of the leaves louder than my own pulse. I whispered my name, almost laughing. The sound was swallowed by the fog. The figure didn't move. It hovered, silent, patient. The trees shifted with a sigh. The shadows stretched toward me. Or maybe it was me stretching toward them. I couldn't tell. I took another step. The fog moved faster, curling around my ankles, tugging at me. The glow wavered again. Closer now, watching. A chill ran through my fingers. I pressed them to my arms. The night smelled of wet moss and something faintly bitter, like metal left out in the rain. The wind was still, and yet the forest breathed around me. I felt a presence brush past my shoulder. Not flesh, not wind. Something colder, older. It didn't speak. It just was. The moonlight caught a flicker between two trees. A figure, thin, hovering slightly off the ground. No face, just a blur of pale light in the darkness. I wanted to turn, to run, to breathe. My feet were rooted. The fog held me. The shadow held me. And then it waited, watching, not moving closer, not leaving, just waiting. I blinked. The figure remained. The night remained. and I walked slower, careful not to disturb the fog, careful not to disturb it. The lantern swung lightly in my hand. Its light was small, fragile against the darkness. The forest pressing on all sides, thick with fog and shadow. A flicker. I thought it was the wind, but the air was still. Another flare. A crouched shape. Too thin, too long. Eyes that reflected the lantern, but moved differently than I did. I blinked. The shape vanished. A memory or a figure. I couldn't tell. The lantern shivered again. Warmth rushed over my hands. Then cold, like the forest inhaled me. Heat and cold, chasing each other across my skin. I breathed slowly, trying to match the rhythm. The fog swirled around my ankles. It smelled of wet moss and decay. Every step left my boots heavier. Flicker, another figure, watching. Still, closer this time, though I hadn't moved. A low hum vibrated through the air, static-like, tingling in my teeth, in my ears. It didn't hurt, but it unsettled the breath in my chest. The forest felt alive. It inhaled, it exhaled. My skin prickled as if the trees were breathing with me. The lantern blinked again. Impossible figures danced in the corners. Some crouched, their limbs folded strangely. Some just waited. I turned slowly. The light hit their faces, if they had faces. Eyes reflected. Blank, pale, and infinite. The hum rose. I could feel it in my stomach, in my fingertips. It wrapped around the fog, vibrating through the damp air. Flicker. I felt heat crawl up my neck, then cold down my spine. My pulse echoed inside my skull. Or maybe it was a forest pulse. A shadow moved behind a tree. Or did it appear where none had been? I held the lantern tighter. The metal burned my fingers. Another flicker. They were closer, watching, crouched, waiting. The fog thickened. It licked at my ankles. It smelled of earth and iron. Every inhale tasted heavy. The hum stretched. It was not constant. It ebbed and pulsed. Sometimes soft, like breathing. Sometimes sharp, like static in my ears. The lantern flared violently. For a moment, the trees appeared hollow. Figures lined the trunks. Eyes glowing faintly in the pale light. Some crouched low, waiting. Some stood too still. I could feel the fog pressing against my face. My hair damp. My clothes soaked. The forest breath brushed my neck. Flicker. The lantern died. A single flare. Then nothing. Darkness. Thick. Complete. No moon. No shapes. No fog. Only the hum. A static, distant, like the forest's voice in my chest. It vibrated with me. Through me, I swallowed. The cold bit my lungs. I could hear my own heartbeat. And then nothing else. The figures were gone. Or I could no longer see them. The forest waited. Silent. Patient. My lantern was gone. The world was gone. And I was still. Alone, but not entirely. The mist thinned just enough for me to see it. A shape. Crooked. Sinking into the fog like it had been waiting for me. A cabin. Abandoned or pretending to be. Its wood warped and swollen from years of damp nights. The pale light of dawn barely touched it. I stepped closer. Each breath came out cold. The fog tasted like wet bark and dust. The deeper I walked into the clearing, the quieter the forest became. No rustling. No soft footsteps of animals. Only my own breath catching in my throat. The door hung open a little. Not wide enough to invite. Not closed enough to warn. I pushed it with my fingertips. The wood sighed, long and tired. Inside, the air vibrated. A low hum, almost musical. Like the cabin itself had a heartbeat. The floorboards dipped under my weight. Dust rose in thin threads, swirling with the fog that had followed me in. The room smelled of old smoke and damp earth. I paused. The humming deepened. It moved through my ribs. Gentle, steady wrong. A soft footstep echoed behind me. Light. Too close. I turned. No one. Only fog pressing through the open doorway. Another step, somewhere inside the walls. Slow, measured, like someone pacing. I held my breath. The shadows along the far corner twisted. They didn't follow the shape of the window. They bent upward, stretching like long fingers searching for something. The humming shifted with them. It rose, then dipped like breath being pulled through hollow bone. Each note scraped lightly across my skin. I stepped deeper into the cabin. The air grew warmer, then colder. My hands tingled. My neck prickled. A door on the left creaked open all on its own. Just an inch. Just enough to make the silence tremble. I didn't want to look, but my eyes slid toward it anyway. The room beyond was darker than it should have been. No shape, no light, only a deeper kind of black. The humming pulled me, like a thread wrapped around my spine. The shadows swayed with each breath I took. They leaned, tilted, bent until they almost touched the floor. Footsteps again, soft, inside the cabin, then behind me, then ahead, moving in circles I couldn't follow. I backed toward the door. My heel touched the threshold. I stepped outside, or I tried to. The forest was gone. Not hidden, not changed. Gone. Where the trees should have been, there was only mist. Endless. Thick. A wall of white blur that swallowed everything. No rustling leaves. No shapes. No path waiting for my return. I reached out a hand. The fog felt dense, like wet wool. Cold gathered around my wrist, climbing slowly up my arm. The humming leaked through the doorway behind me. It pulsed against my back, calling me in, as if the cabin did not want to be alone. I stepped back inside, not because I wanted to, but because there was nowhere else to go. The door swung quietly behind me. A gentle close, almost polite. The humming steadied, soft as breath in the dark. Shadows bent toward me, slow, careful, like they were listening. I stood in the center of the room, wrapped in the vibrating air. The floor creaked once beneath me. Then everything fell still. No footsteps, no shifting walls. Just silence shaped into a hum. And in that silence, I understood I was not lost. The forest had not vanished. It had simply changed places, leaving me alone with whatever waited inside the hollow sound. Morning never fully came. Not here, not in this part of the woods. The light was thin, washed out, drifting to the fog like it was lost. I stepped away from the cabin. The cold air brushed my cheeks, sharp and damp. The trees felt taller than before. Their branches arched overhead, tangled like ribs around a breathing chest. Every inhale tasted like wet bark and old leaves. Something watched me. I felt it before I saw it. A pressure behind my neck, steady and patient. I lifted my eyes. Between the branches, a glow. Not white, not yellow. Something in between. Soft but aware. The eyes blinked once and vanished. Yet the way their gaze stayed on my skin, warm like a hand pressed too long. I took a slow step forward. Fog curled around my boots, tugging lightly. A faint rustling drifted through the branches, though the wind was barely there. Another pair of eyes. Higher up, watching through the pale light. I stared at them. They vanished again, leaving silence that thickened around my ears. The forest felt different. Listening, reacting. Every movement I made sent a shiver through branches. A whisper came from the left. Soft, not English, not any language I knew. The syllables slid together like breath across stone. My heart tightened. The whisper drifted again, closer, then farther, like someone circled me in slow, quiet loops. I turned. Fog brushed my ankles. The cold rose up my legs in a steady wave. Eyes appeared behind a tree trunk. Two small orbs glowing faintly. Then another set to the right. Then another, higher, almost touching the branches. I blinked hard. All gone. But the sense of being watched grew thicker, settling into my shoulders like weight. The whispers continued. Soft, broken phrases. Almost rhythmic. Almost like a chant. I tried to steady my breath. Heat pulsed once against my ear, like something exhaled beside me. I turned again, nothing. Only the fog stretching out in thin, trembling strands. A pattern tugged at the edge of my thoughts. A rhythm in the way the eyes appeared, in the way the whispers circled. Always behind me, always just out of reach. I moved forward slowly. My footsteps pressed into the damp earth, each one quieter than the last. The forest shifted with me. Branches dipped, shadows stretched. Fog drifted in thin ribbons through the trees. More eyes opened, Not all at once. One here, two there, a cluster high above me, watching with a dim, hungry glow. They disappeared whenever I tried to catch them directly, but I felt their presence linger. A warmth on my cheek, a pulse against my spine, a breath that didn't match mine. The whispers came again, a strange rise and fall, a pattern I couldn't understand, but it wound itself around my ribs, drawing them tight. I stopped walking. The forest stopped with me. No rustling, no movement, only the faint hum beneath the ground, vibrating up through my soles. I closed my eyes for a moment. The darkness behind my eyelids felt safer than the trees. Warmer, almost. When I opened them, the eyes were everywhere. Hundreds, maybe more, layered through the branches like cold stars pressed too close. They didn't move. They didn't blink. They just watched, waiting for something I couldn't name. The whispers faded. The wind held its breath. The pattern slipped from my mind before I could grasp it. I felt small beneath those branches, small beneath those eyes. The fog pressed softly against my arms, like it wanted me to stay still. So I did, only for a moment, long enough to feel the forest breathe around me, long enough to feel the gaze of things that vanish when seen. I took one step back. The eyes flickered, then dimmed, then disappeared altogether. The silence returned, thick, heavy, full of things I almost understood, and the forest, once again, waited, watching from somewhere just beyond my reach. Dawn tried to reach the forest floor, but the fog swallowed most of it. Only a pale glow slipped through the branches, thin as a breath. I walked slowly, the cold sinking into my sleeves, the scent of damp soil hovering close to my skin. The trees felt heavier today, their trunks pressed into the ground like they were hiding something beneath them. I could feel it before I heard it, a low hum, deep, vibrating through the earth. It rose up through my boots, a steady pulse that made my ankles tremble. The soil shifted under me, as if exhaling. I knelt without meaning to. My fingers brushed the ground, warm, then cold. The rhythm moved through the dirt, beating with a strange second heartbeat. The roots beneath my touch twitched. Thin, wiry shapes curled and uncurled like sleeping creatures waking too soon. The earth gave off a faint metallic smell, sharp enough to tighten my throat. I pulled my hand back. The hum grew stronger, a slow vibration that crawled up my spine and settled beneath my ribs. The air around me stilled. No rustling leaves. No distant soft footsteps. Only the heavy, quiet pressing into my ears. Across the clearing, a shadow crouched low to the ground, still, watching. A shape darkened the trees, its outline blurred by fog. I couldn't see a face, only the curve of a back and the long, patient tilt of its head. It didn't move, not even when the roots twitched again, not even when the soil beneath me pulsed hard enough to make my breath catch. I felt my own heartbeat loud, sharp, too quick, echoing, inside the hum rising through my legs. For a moment, the two rhythms matched, mine and the one beneath the earth. Then they slipped out of sync, pushing against each other, tightening my chest. The ground vibrated. The trees swayed without wind. Fog drifted in slow circles around my knees, carrying the thin scent of wet leaves and something older. The crouched figure leaned forward, just a little, like it was listening, like it could feel the hum too. Its shadow stretched toward me, long and thin, reaching across the trembling soil. The pale light caught its outline, but never its details. I took a small step back. The earth pulsed harder, almost impatient. A low throb pressed against my bones, dull and heavy. Roots shifted beneath the surface. I could see the soil lift, like something moving under a blanket, curling, uncurling, never quite breaking through. My breath turned shallow. The fog tasted thick, almost bitter, as if it carried a hum in it. The figure did not blink, did not sway, did not breathe in any way I recognized. I felt the pressure grow beneath my feet, a push from the ground that made my knees shake. Then silence. The hum stopped. The soil stilled. The roots froze mid-twitch. The quiet that followed was heavier than the vibration. It pressed against my ears, my throat, my chest. The figure straightened by an inch. A slow, deliberate movement, like it had been waiting for that silence. I held my breath. The fog crept closer, wrapping around my ankles again. Nothing moved. Not the trees. Not the roots. Not the figure. I stepped back once more, feeling the cold bite at my heels. Still no hum. No pulse. Only the memory of it, echoing faintly in my bones. The figure shifted its weight, only enough to let me know it was still there, still watching, still present. I didn't run. I didn't breathe deeply. I just moved one careful step at a time, away from the trembling ground, away from the roots that try to move, away from the thing that listened in the fog. When I finally reached the edge of the clearing, the silence followed me, soft, heavy, waiting for the hum to return. Late afternoon light followed me through the trees. The air felt thick, warm for early autumn, heavy enough that each breath brushed against my lips like damp cloth. I walked along a narrow trail, the soil soft, my boots sinking a little deeper than they should. Pale fog drifted low, touching my ankles, curling around fallen leaves that crumbled under each step. And there, beneath my own footsteps, came another rhythm, soft, light, trailing behind me. I thought it was another hiker at first, someone keeping pace, someone moving with the same slow patience. But when I paused, everything paused with me. The forest held its breath. Branches froze mid-sway. Even the insects seemed to sink into silence. I tried again. One step forward, careful, quiet. The answering footstep pressed down a heartbeat later. Not echoing. Following. I swallowed, tasting the cold metallic bite of the air. My fingers brushed the rough bark of a leaning pine, steadying myself, grounding myself, but it felt wrong, warm on one side, chilled on the other, as if the tree was hiding a breath of its own. I moved faster, not running, just trying to stay calm. The footsteps behind me sped up too, light taps in the leaves, soft pressure in the moss, almost playful, almost curious. The fog thickened until distance felt strange, bending the trail ahead, smearing the line between near and far. Trees leaned inward, their dark branches low enough to brush my shoulders as if they wanted to steer me somewhere. I wiped moisture from my face, my hand trembling. I told myself it was just the wind, just an echo, just the forest settling for the night. But the steps stopped when I stopped. They breathed when I breathed, and I couldn't see anyone. I crouched for a moment, touching the earth. The soil felt cold and slick, as if something had passed through moments before. Leaves pressed down in small circles, as if tiny feet had stepped on them, then vanished. A faint smell of wet stone drifted by, sharp enough to tighten my chest. I straightened slowly, the fog brushing my neck like fingers. The light around me turned pale, drained of color. My own shadow shortened, then stretched, then flickered in a way shadows shouldn't. I tried speaking, just a whisper, "Who's there?" The trees didn't answer, but the footsteps did. One slow step. Right behind me, my breath stuttered. I took another step forward. The steps followed, but closer this time, almost touching my heels. The forest twisted the path again, pulling me into a narrow corridor of trees. Their trunks curved, bending at angles that made me feel small, watched, held in place like prey. I pushed through until the trail opened suddenly. A clearing, wide, pale, open, yet somehow more suffocating than the tight wood behind me. The air changed. Cooler. Still, my ears filled with a faint static buzz, like distant wires humming in the sky. I stepped into the center, without meaning to, just drawn there, maybe by relief, maybe by fear. Leaves rustled around the edge of the clearing. Soft movements. Light, cautious circling. I tightened my jacket around my ribs, feeling my heartbeat pulse against the fabric. My throat felt dry, even with the damp air pressing in. The footsteps began again. Not behind me this time. Around me. Slow at first, gentle as a child walking in a circle. I turned, watching the fog ripple with each step. I couldn't see anything inside it. No legs, no body, just motion. The moss dipped with each invisible footfall, sinking slightly, rising again. Leaves shifted and rolled outward as if pushed by someone's toes. The circle tightened. One slow rotation. Then another. Then faster, keeping perfect distance from me. My breath shook in my chest. I didn't know where to look. Every side felt wrong. Every direction felt watched. I closed my eyes for one long moment. The cool air brushing my eyelashes, my skin prickling as if touched by static. When I opened them again, the footsteps had paused. Everything was still. The clearing, the fog, the bent trees, all holding their breath with me. I stood completely still, waiting for something, a whisper, a shape, anything solid to tell me this was real. But the only thing that moved was the faint drift of fog curling at my ankles. I stepped backward once. Just a test. Leaves pressed down behind me, answering. Soft, precise, pausing exactly when I froze. The circle didn't break. It only waited as if deciding something. The pale light dimmed, slipping behind clouds without warning. My shadow thinned until it almost disappeared. I exhaled slowly, letting my breath spread into the cold air around me. For a moment, for just a fragile beat, the forest fell into perfect silence, and the footsteps stopped too. Not gone, not finished, just waiting there with me in the center of the clearing as the night began to swallow the last of the daylight. Night settled slow around me, deep autumn cold, a thin layer of fog drifting low across the forest floor, brushing my legs like something alive, something searching. I moved carefully, each step quiet in the damp leaves. My breath rose in pale threads, fading as soon as they touched the air. The trees leaned close, dark bark slick with moisture, their branches low enough to scrape my jacket. I felt alone, yet not alone. There was a hush that didn't feel natural, a waiting kind of silence, thick and full. My heartbeat felt louder in the stillness, soft against my ribs, too loud in my ears. I paused to steady myself, resting a hand against a crooked trunk. The bark felt cold under my fingers, then oddly warm, as if the tree held a pulse. Then the light appeared, a faint glow between the distant trees, soft, thin, almost like a lantern covered in silk. It wasn't bright, just enough to brush the fog with a pale shimmer, enough to make the shadows wobble and stretch. My breath caught. Something inside me leaned toward it before my body did. A small pull, gentle, almost comforting. I didn't move closer. Not yet. I only watched as the glow trembled, shifting like it was pushing through the trees, or breathing. The forest around me felt heavier, the cold deeper, the smell of wet earth sharper in the back of my throat. But that pale light, it felt warm in a way nothing else did. I took a step without meaning to. Just one. Leaves rustled under my boot, moist and soft. The glow brightened a little, as if responding to me. My chest tightened, not from fear, not exactly. Something like longing pressed against my ribs, a need I couldn't explain. I stepped forward again. The fog curled back from my legs. The trees opened slightly, bending as if making room. The pale glow swayed between the trunks, not flickering, not fading, just moving very gently side to side. My mouth felt dry, even though the air was damp enough to cling to my skin. I felt the urge to whisper to it, to call out, but no words came. I lifted a hand instead, reaching without thinking. The cold brushed my wrist. The warmth from that light brushed somewhere deeper. But the moment my weight shifted forward, the glow retreated. Not fast, just a slow drift backward, like it wanted to follow or didn't want me too close. I froze. My breath trembled in the cold air. The forest listened again, holding itself still. The light paused between two tall pines. It hovered, almost perfectly round, almost alive. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears again. A soft thud, steady, but too heavy in the quiet. The pull inside me grew stronger, a thin thread attached to my chest, gently pulling forward, asking, calling. I wanted to step toward it. I really did. Something about the pale glow felt familiar, like a childhood memory half forgotten. A warmth from somewhere safe. I raised my foot, and the glow dimmed, just slightly, like a warning, like a breath drawn in. The fog shifted fast around my ankles, curling inward as if it wanted to anchor me in place. I let my foot fall back to the ground. The light steadied again, soft and patient, waiting. But my body shook now. Cold curled up my spine. The longing twisted into something sharper, something I didn't recognize. I tried to look past the glow, tried to see what was holding it, but the light blurred the edges of everything around it. Branches melted into shadow. Shapes drifted and disappeared. I felt myself sway toward it again. My fingers tingled, numb at the tips. The light pulsed once. A slow inhale, then a slow exhale. I stepped forward, just a fraction, and the pale glow vanished. Gone, as if someone pinched it out with 2 fingers. No fade, no drift, no dimming. Just darkness. Thick, immediate, waiting. The fog seemed to collapse in on itself, rushing back into the space the light had held. Shadows swarmed the trunks like ink spilled too fast. My breath hitched. The cold air pressed against my face, sharp and metallic. I blinked, trying to see anything, but the forest was darker than it had been before, a deeper, heavier dark that felt almost solid. The longing inside me shuddered, then drained away, leaving something like hollowness in its place. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to steady the tremble in my hands. The silence grew heavier. The trees creaked softly, their branches swaying in a breeze I couldn't feel. I tried to listen for footsteps, for whispers, for anything familiar, but after the light went out, the forest had changed. The air smelled different, colder, older. The ground seemed softer beneath my boots, as if the earth had loosened. I stood there, staring at the space where the glow had been, just shadow now, thick enough to hide anything. A pale thread of fog drifted past my ankles, as if guiding me back, or warning me not to stay. I let out a slow breath, the warmth fading instantly in the chilled air. Then I stepped away from the place where the light had been, because whatever warmth it held was gone now, and the darkness that replaced it felt like something watching me breathe. The morning felt colder than it should have. Late autumn light barely touched the forest floor, slipping through branches like pale threads. Mist clung to the ground, low and stubborn, brushing against my ankles with every slow step. I walked carefully through the leaves. They were damp, soft, carrying a faint earthy scent that rose with each movement. My breath drifted in front of me, thin and white, dissolving into the chilled air. For a moment, everything felt still, simple, quiet. Then the rustling began. It matched my steps perfectly. A soft drag, a gentle shift, each time my boot touched the ground. At first, I thought it was just the leaves settling behind me, the forest adjusting to my weight. But as I walked farther, the rustling stayed close. Too close. I paused. The rustling paused too. The silence tightened around me, thick and expectant. Only my heartbeat moved, slow and heavy in my chest. I lifted my foot again, only an inch. The leaves behind me rustled, matching the motion, almost echoing it. I froze, foot hovering awkwardly above ground. The air felt colder on my skin now. The fog curled in, filling the space around my legs like a living thing. I lowered my foot. Soft crunch. Soft echo. My throat tightened. My breath came out slower than before, catching in the back of my mouth. I turned, expecting to see someone, a hiker, maybe, or an animal shifting through the leaves. But there was nothing. Only trees. Tall, dark, still. Their branches tangled overhead like a net holding the pale morning light. No movement. No shadow. Only the leaves under my boots. And the ones that shouldn't have moved at all. I took another step. The rustling followed. Not behind me this time. Not exactly. It felt like it came from everywhere the leaves touched. Like the forest floor breathed in time with me. The back of my neck prickled. A slow warmth spreading under the skin, the kind that comes when you feel eyes, even when you don't see them. I stepped again. The rustling grew clearer. Perfectly timed. A soft drag. A soft shift. Not delayed. Not early. Mirrored. I quickened my pace. The rustling quickened too. The fog swirled thick around my shins, stirred by my movement, and something else, something following just out of reach. I kept walking, trying to stay calm, breathing in shallow, controlled pulls. My fingers brushed the rough bark of a tree as I passed it, grounding myself in the texture. But the leaves kept moving around me, too eager, too close. My heartbeat picked up. My palms felt damp inside my gloves. I slowed again. Stopped. The rustling didn't stop this time. It continued, soft, persistent, circling, almost brushing the edges of my hearing. The leaves trembled in a widening ring around me, shifting without wind, without touch, as if something beneath them was choosing where to rise, where to fall. I swallowed hard. My breath shook on the way out. The forest wasn't just echoing me now. It was responding. I could feel in the soil under my boots. A faint vibration, light as a pulse. A slow rhythm that didn't belong to my body. I lifted my foot again, testing, and the rustling surged, circling tighter, sharper, not matching, moving on its own. I stepped back, and the leaves behind me lifted and settled like they knew I would retreat. The smell of damp earth thickened, almost metallic, pressing into my throat. The rustling grew louder, but still soft, like thousands of tiny movements, all try to stay quiet, all trying to stay just out of sight. I turned slowly, scanning the trees. Their shadows stretched long across the forest floor, dark and unmoving, but the leaves kept shifting, following, adjusting. Not a creature, not a person, the forest itself. I backed away, step by step. Each movement felt heavy, like wading through something unseen. The fog curled tighter around my ankles, rising higher, brushing my knees like cold fingers. The rustling stayed close, matching my retreat, shadowing each breath. My throat felt tight, every inhale shallow, controlled. I wanted to run, but the trees leaned inward, their trunks bending in slightly unnatural angles, making the distance between them look wrong, too narrow, too far. I kept moving, slow and careful, my boots sinking into the damp leaves. The rustling followed, never ahead, never beside, always just behind, like it waited for me to lead. A thin whisper wind brushed my cheek, though the branches above didn't move. The scent of wet bark and cold moss hit me sharply, almost bitter. I stepped into a small gap between two leaning trees. The leaves hesitated, only for a second. Then they rushed forward again, dragging softly across the ground as though being pulled along. I didn't look back again. I kept my eyes ahead, on the faintest sliver of clearing, pale with weak daylight. The rustling stayed close behind, steady and patient. Not hunting, not chasing, simply following. Like the forest had decided, I no longer moved alone. When I finally reached the edge of the trees, the rustling slowed, dimmed, faded into a long, careful silence. I stepped out into the clearing. The air felt different here, lighter, less watching. But when I looked back at the tree line, the leaves trembled once more in a slow, deliberate ripple, as if waiting for my next step. The forest felt heavier that afternoon. Late autumn light barely slipped through branches, falling in thin, cold lines across the ground. Fog drifted low, crawling between roots like a slow, pale tide. I walked without thinking where I was going, boots brushing through damp leaves. Each step carried the faint scent of wet bark and soil. My breath rose in soft, shaky clouds. Somewhere behind me, the forest settled into a deep silence. No rustling, no distant hum, just a hush thick enough to press against my ears. That was when I saw it, a hollow trunk, wide and dark, leaning slightly as though bowing toward the fog. Its bark twisted in spirals, gnarled and old, smelling faintly of sap and something sweet, something off. I stepped closer, drawn without meaning to. My fingertips hovered over the wood, feeling its warmth before I even touched it. Inside the hollow, carved into the inner curve of the trunk, was a door, small, perfect, impossible, no taller than my hand, shaped from the wood itself, polished smooth as if someone or something had spent years creating it. Tiny lines swirled across its surface, looping like symbols I almost recognized, even though I knew I'd never seen them before. I crouched down slowly. My knees brushed the cold leaves. I felt a faint pull in my chest, like a gentle tug behind my ribs. The door didn't belong here. I knew that, but it waited, still, silent. A soft warmth drifted from the hollow, like a small breath moving past my skin. Not wind, deeper, more deliberate. I whispered without meaning to. "What are you?" My voice felt too loud, even though it barely left my throat. The fog curled behind me. The air thickened with a quiet pressure. I leaned closer. The wood smelled warm now, almost comforting, but underneath it was another scent, a faint sweetness, like something just starting to rot. I should have walked away. I knew that too, but curiosity slid beneath my skin, steady and warm, pulling me toward the tiny door. Another breath drifted out from within the hollow, this time warmer, closer. It brushed my cheek like something living inside the tree exhaled against my skin. My stomach tightened. My heartbeat felt wrong, too slow, too heavy. I placed my fingers on the tiny door. The wood pulsed faintly under my touch, like the warmth inside was trying to reach me. I hesitated, my breath shaky. Quiet. The forest held its silence around me, watching. A whisper rose from behind the door. Not words I understood, just soft tones curling together, slipping into my ears like they belonged there, like they were calling something I had forgotten in myself. I felt the pull again in my chest. Stronger, a quiet pressure behind my sternum. I whispered back without thinking, my voice low and unsteady. I shouldn't, but my hand didn't pull away. The whisper inside shifted, gentle, coaxing, almost kind. A warm breath followed it, brushing my fingers, wrapping around my knuckles like a plea. The tiny door trembled, only once, barely enough to see, but I felt it, a soft vibration traveling into my hand, up my wrist, settling cold into my shoulder. My breath hitched. The fog behind me seemed to tighten, closing in with a faint static hum. I could have stepped back. I didn't. My thumb pressed a little wooden handle, a handle too small to exist, and the door eased open with a quiet sigh. Warm air spilled out, thick, heavy, carrying the scent of damp soil and something deeper, like breath rising from a dark place underground. Inside the hollow, the darkness moved, just a ripple, just enough to make my spine stiffen. Something whispered again, close, right at the edge of hearing. My name, or something shaped like my name. My chest tightened sharply. My skin prickled with heat and cold at the same time. I leaned back slowly, eyes fixed on the hollow. The warm breath reached out one last time, brushing my jaw, almost tender. Then everything stopped. The warmth vanished. The whisper cut off mid-breath. The hollow sat still and empty, the tiny door hanging open like a broken secret. A rush of cold moved through me as the fog recoiled, pulling back just enough to make the silence feel huge. I stared at the little door, my pulse loud in my throat. The forest around me seemed to exhale in one long, low shift. Branches creaking, leaves trembling, soil settling, as if everything had been waiting for me to open it. Regret pressed hard against my ribs. Sharp, immediate. I reached for the door, wanted to close it, to seal whatever waited behind the darkness. But just before my fingers touched the wood again, the hollow pulsed. A faint, deep hum rising from below the roots, like something waking at the bottom of the earth. I pulled my hand back. The tiny door remained open, still, patient. The air around it smelled warm again, breathing, waiting. And I knew I never should have touched it. The path was thin beneath me, cold dirt, late autumn air pressing against my cheeks. Pale light filtered through branches, soft and tired, the way evening light gets when it's almost gone. Fog drifted low, brushing against my ankles like it was trying to cling to me. I walked slowly. My breath felt warm in the chill, rising in small clouds. Every few steps, the forest gave a quiet hum, a kind of distant stillness that wrapped around my ears. But the shadows, they were the first thing I noticed. They didn't fall the way they should. They didn't stretch with the angle of the sun. They held their places at the edges of the path, dark and unmoving, like they had settled there long before I arrived. I tried to tell myself it was just a fading light, just the hour, just tired eyes. But each time I blinked, each time I slowed my steps, the shadows seemed to wait for me. The trees whispered overhead. Leaves trembled without wind. A faint static crawled under my skin as I walked deeper, feeling very alone, though nothing touched me. I kept my eyes forward, but my sight kept sliding to sides. Something in those dark shapes tugged at my focus. Not loud, not sharp, just there, pulling, At first, the shadows were smooth, blurry around the edges, silent. Then one of them shifted, so small, a ripple, like something inside it exhaled. My feet stopped before I meant them to. The cold breath of the forest moved past my collar. In the pale light, the shadow closest to me seemed to lift its center, the way a head might rise from a pillow. I thought it was my imagination, but the shape stretched, almost shy, and unfurled into the outline of the face. Not detailed, just hints. A curve where a cheek might be, a dip where an eye should rest. My throat tightened. The fog around my legs felt heavier. The silence grew thick, swallowing even the rustling leaves. I stepped back. The shadow flickered, but didn't dissolve. Instead, it shifted again. The face lengthened into a long, narrow snout. Ears rose like thin triangles. For a few heartbeats, a dark animal crouched at the edge of the path, watching, listening. Then it collapsed inward, slow and collapsing like wet paper, turning into nothing more than a smear of darkness on the dirt. I felt the forest waiting, listening to the thud of my heartbeat. Every breath I took felt too loud. I kept walking. Soft footsteps, my own, moved with me, but every time I passed another cluster of trees, I felt the shadows pulse. They didn't lunge. They didn't reach. They only lingered, tight against the roots and the moss, like they were turning toward me, without moving at all. One of them stretched tall as I neared it. Not a person, not an animal. Something longer, something thin. It swayed, even though the air didn't move. The pale light shivered across it, but the shadow didn't break apart. It held itself together like it had weight, like it had purpose. My fingers tingled. My palms grew damp inside my gloves. I tried not to breathe too fast, but the forest felt alive around me, awake in a way I had never felt before. Every rustling leaf felt closer, every distant hum sharper. The silence behind me stretched further and further, as if something followed but refused to touch the path. The shadows clung to their places, watching through shapes that sometimes became faces, then vanished, then returned as something new. A long stretch of the trail curved to the left, where the fog was thicker. I walked into it slowly, letting the cold wrap around my knees, my chest, my throat. The world felt muted, flattened, like breathing under deep water. To my right, a shadow stretched across the ground, reaching toward the trail. I stepped around it, but it grew longer, stretching after me like a slow, patient hand. It stopped just short of my boot. The air trembled. A soft hum moved past my ear, warm and close, but nothing was there. I felt the forest watching again, not from a single place, from everywhere the darkness touched. Faces formed in the corners. Animals took shape in the dirt. Then everything melted back into still, silent patches of black that refused to follow the rules of light. Something inside me whispered to run, to leave the path, to push through the trees. But another part of me understood. The shadows wanted me to step closer. They wanted me to give them shape, to let the fear sharpen them into something real. So I kept moving, steady, quiet. The fog thinned as the trail widened. The pale light softened into the last stretch of evening, and the shadows, one by one, pulled back. They didn't retreat far, just enough to let me pass, just enough to make me wonder if they had ever been there at all. At the end of the path, a soft breeze finally moved through the leaves, warm, gentle, almost like a breath on my shoulder. I didn't turn around. I stepped out of the forest, leaving the lingering darkness behind me, but knowing it stayed awake, waiting in the silence, right where I left it. The night felt heavier than usual. Cool air, late autumn mist rolling over the ground like a slow tide. Pale light clung to the tops of the trees, fading into the thick fog pooling around my legs. Every breath tasted damp, cold, and a little metallic. I walked the same narrow trail as before, but it felt different now. Quiet in a deeper way, like the forest was holding itself still. That's when the humming returned. Soft at first, barely there, a low, steady hum that slipped between the branches and settled against my skin. I stopped. The mist curled around my hands as I lifted them, but the fog was thickening too fast. My fingers blurred, then faded completely. The hum grew stronger. Not loud, just close. Close enough that I felt in my chest before I heard in my ears. A slow rhythm, a pulse, almost like it was counting my breaths for me. I tried to steady myself, but the ground felt strange, too soft, like moss soaked through with cold water. The forest around me had changed. Tall shapes softened by the fog. Shadows stretched thin, then disappeared. Only the humming stayed. Every few seconds it dipped lower, then rose in a smooth, careful wave. My head swayed with it. My steps shifted without me choosing to move. I whispered to myself to stop, to stay still. But my body kept leaning forward, drawn toward the unseen space deeper in the mist. The air grew warmer around my shoulders. A faint breath brushed my cheek. I turned, but the fog swallowed everything except the pale shapes of trees. The hum wrapped around the silence like it belonged there. My heartbeat tried to match it. Slow, then slower. My eyelids felt heavy, my thoughts slipping in and out like someone else was sifting through them. The mist rose higher, up to my chest, up to my throat. My hands disappeared completely when I reached for them. Just empty air, just swirling white. I took another step. Even though I didn't want to, my legs trembled, soft footsteps sinking into damp earth. The hum deepened. A warm pressure settled behind my ears. Not painful, more like a hand guiding my head gently forward. I felt dizzy, swaying, unsure where the trail even was anymore. The fog thickened until it looked like a wall in front of me, moving, turning, breathing. I raised my hand again. Still nothing, only mist and that steady, hypnotic vibration in my bones. The forest felt far away, too far, like I had stepped into a place that didn't follow the same rules. The humming pulsed again, stronger this time. My knees weakened. A slow shiver ran up my spine. I waited for the sound to fade, but it didn't. It wrapped around me instead. Circular, rhythmic, pulling. I felt myself leaning toward it, my body tipping forward, as if something had hooked my ribs and was gently tugging. I whispered, "Stop," but the fog swallowed the word before it left my lips. Another wave of humming slid past my ears. It felt warm, almost comforting, but wrong. Too close, too careful, too knowing. The dizziness deepened. The ground wavered. I blinked, and the world snapped into a pale blur. My breath came slow, then slower. The fog around my face felt like cotton, soft, smothering, filling every space of air. I reached out again, not to find the path this time, but to feel anything real, a branch, a root, the bark of a tree. My fingers brushed nothing, just mist, endless, shifting mist. Something moved in it, a faint ripple, a darker curve inside the pale fog, as if something large passed near me but never touched the ground. The humming deepened again, so low it vibrated in my teeth. My balance broke. I pitched forward a step, muscles soft, head foggy, thoughts drifting like they weren't mine anymore. I felt watched, not in a sharp way, more like someone was studying the way I breathed, the way I moved, the way I kept trying to resist. The hum softened just a little, almost sweet, almost comforting. That made it worse. My vision blurred at the corners. The world dimmed into pale shapes and darker bands of shifting shadow. I tried to anchor myself by focusing on the cold, the wet dirt under my boots. The smell of the mist, clean but wrong somehow. The humming swelled. My legs buckled for half a second. I caught myself on nothing, hands finding only air, arms sinking to fog like it was thick, heavy static. I could barely tell if my eyes were open. The mist swallowed the world whole. Trees gone, sky gone, only the thick pale white, and the hum calling from somewhere ahead. I knew I shouldn't move, knew I shouldn't listen, but something warm passed near my cheek. A breath, a presence, a gentle pull that felt like fingers brushing just behind my ear. My body leaned toward it again. I forced my heels into the dirt, shaking, barely holding my own weight. The humming slowed, soft, patient, waiting. The fog around me dipped, as if inhaling. Then, finally, like the forest exhaled, the hum faded. Not gone, just quiet enough to let me breathe again. The mist thinned little by little. My hands reappeared. My boots, the faint curve of the trail. I stood there for a long moment, dizzy but still. The forest didn't move. The air turned cool again, No breath on my skin. No humming in my chest. Only a soft silence settling over everything. I walked away slowly, careful not to look back. Even as the fog dropped behind me, I could still feel that rhythm hiding the trees, waiting for the moment I was alone enough to hear it again. The fog was waiting for me. Thick morning cold. Late autumn air sinking deep into my lungs. The forest felt hollow. Too quiet. Too still. Every branch curved like it was leaning in to listen. I walked slowly, trying to follow the faint line of the trail beneath the pale light, but the mist had grown heavier overnight. It clung to my clothes. It softened every sound until even my own breath felt far away. I kept my eyes low, watching the dirt move under my boots. That's when I saw it. A shadow sliding across the fog in front of me. Not a person, not an animal, just a darker shape moving through the white, shifting like smoke. I froze. The fog curled around me, brushing my arms with cold fingers. My heart pressed harder against my ribs. Too fast, too loud. The shadow stretched, then folded in on itself. I blinked. It was gone. I stayed still for a long moment. Only silence filled the trees. A heavy silence that pressed against my ears until they rang. I took one step. The fog stirred. A shape moved again, this time to my left, floating just above the ground. I turned toward it, but it shifted before I could focus. Long, then small, wide, then thin, like it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. A faint pressure tightened across my chest, almost like someone had rested their palm there. Warm at first, then heavier. I swallowed, but my throat felt tight. I whispered inside my own mind, telling myself not to panic, to breathe, to keep walking. But the pressure stayed. I took another step, and the shadow slid behind a tree. Its edges rippled, melting into the fog, then reappearing farther back along the path. My breath faltered. It was following me, not like footsteps or rustling leaves, but like a presence changing shape to stay just out of sight. The fog grew thicker around my legs. Cold, wet, pulling at my clothes as if trying to slow me down. I turned my head slowly. The shape was behind me now. Clothes, resting in the fog like a dark stain spreading outward. I couldn't see its face. There was no face. Just shifting outlines, like a silhouette drawn by a trembling hand. I tried to look away, but the pressure on my chest grew heavier, pushing deeper, making my breath come sharp and shallow. It felt like the shadow was sinking into me without touching me at all. My fingers trembled. The air smelled like wet earth and cold bark. The mist hummed softly, not a sound, just a feeling that crawled under my skin. I stepped back. The shape stretched forward. I stepped to the side. Its outline rolled to the fog like ink swirling in water. Panic rose fast, scraping up my spine. My legs felt weak. The forest spun in pale circles. I tried to focus on the ground, but the fog swallowed everything below my knees. The shadow moved faster now, flickering between shapes. Tall, crouched, broken, smooth. It didn't stay anything for more than a breath. I squeezed my hands into fists just to feel something solid. Damp skin. Cold air. Nothing else. The shadow slid behind me again. Closer. So close the space around my back felt warmer, like it was breathing against my coat. I didn't hear anything, but I felt it. A soft exhale. Not on my skin, inside my chest. My pulse stuttered. I turned as slowly as I could. The fog parted for a second, just enough to show the edge of a shape standing almost shoulder close. It wavered, then slipped away like it had never been there at all. I stepped back until my heel hit a root. I almost fell, catching myself on a branch slick with moisture. My fingers shook so hard the bark felt like sand. The shadow reappeared in front of me for a heartbeat, thin and curved, then melting into fog again. I couldn't tell where it started or where it ended, only that it was near, always near. My breath came in uneven bursts. Each inhale felt smaller than the last, like the air around me had thickened with the fog. I whispered a small plea into the silence. Not words, just fear. The pressure suddenly lifted, not gone, just drifting away like a slow tide pulling back. The shape faded deeper into the fog, shrinking until it blended with the pale white around it. I waited for it to return, for the warm press on my chest. for the shifting outline behind my shoulder. But nothing came, only soft mist brushing against my face, only the quiet echo of my breathing. I took one careful step forward, then another. The fog no longer swirled with shadows. The trees returned in dark, steady lines, but the air still felt thick, as if holding the memory of something watching me from just beyond my reach. I didn't turn around again. I kept walking until the pale light began to break through the mist and the forest finally loosened its grip. Even then, the feeling of that shape stayed with me, a reminder that something formless had learned the rhythm of my breath and could find me again whenever the fog grew heavy enough. The forest was still. Thick fog hovered low, pressing against my ankles. The damp air carried the sharp scent of moss and wet bark. I moved slowly along the narrow trail, every step muted under the weight of silence. The trees leaned in, their branches almost touching my shoulders. Then it came, a soft, static hum. It wasn't wind. It wasn't any animal I could name. I stopped. The sound filled my ears, vibrating through my skull. I pressed my hands against them, trying to block it, but it only grew. The fog seemed to pulse with it. Shadows shivered along the trunks. The earth beneath my boots felt alive, almost breathing. The hum rose and fell, rhythmic, teasing. I tilted my head, listening. The air smelled warmer here, metallic and damp. I stepped forward. The forest reacted. Every tree seemed to lean closer. Leaves rustled with an intention that was not wind. I tried to move faster, but the static followed. Not a sound outside me, but inside me, pressing against every nerve. A shiver ran down my spine. My fingers tingled. The fog swirled around my calves like it had weight, coating my legs in cold, wet silk. The hum shifted. It pulsed between low and high tones, wrapping my chest and stomach in vibration. It didn't matter if I closed my eyes. It echoed in every corner of my skull. I stumbled slightly. The path seemed longer than before. Distance bent strangely in the fog. I couldn't tell where I had been or where I was going. The forest itself waited. Air hung thick, still but alive. Every branch, every leaf, seemed tuned to the vibration of the static. I held my breath, but the sound penetrated deeper. It moved like water inside me, washing against my bones. Shadows bent unnaturally along the trail. Sometimes they stretched thin, sometimes they pulsed with the same rhythm as a hum. I couldn't look directly at them for long. They dissolved when I focused, but the sense of presence lingered. I pressed my palms to the fog. Cold moisture clung to my skin. The hum shifted again, higher, insistent. I felt my chest tighten. My legs trembled beneath me. The static was everywhere and nowhere. I tried to follow the trail, but the fog thickened. It curled around my fingers, my boots, my collar. Every step felt doubled, mirrored, as if the forest itself was moving with me. I paused. The hum steadied into a low, almost musical vibration. It seemed to echo in the hollows of my bones. I felt trapped, alone. The fog swallowed every familiar shape. A sudden gust lifted the mist briefly. Branches swayed, but the forest held its tension. Shadows trembled at the edges of vision. And the hum, it lingered in the silence like a heartbeat. I moved again. Slow, careful steps. The vibration sank into the soles of my feet, through the soil and roots. The fog rose higher with every movement, as if it wanted to claim me entirely. I swallowed. The forest didn't respond to sound. It responded to me. Every heartbeat echoed. Every breath met the waiting fog. Then, for a heartbeat, the hum softened. It became distant, almost tender, and I realized the forest wasn't just watching. It was alive, waiting, breathing with the static that had invaded me. I kept walking, slowly, eyes fixed on the pale outline of the trail ahead, hands brushing damp leaves, boots pressing into wet soil. The hum faded just enough to let me think, but the memory of its weight, pressing inside my skull, lingered long after the fog thinned. And I knew, even in silence, the forest remembered. The static waited, and it would return when the fog thickened again. The forest was quiet, heavier than usual. Fog wrapped around the tree trunks like thin gauze. Damp leaves stuck to my boots with every step. The air smelled of wet earth and fading pine. Each breath felt thick, lingering in my throat. The path ahead blurred beneath the pale, ghostly light. Then it came. A laugh, faint, hollow, echoing softly between the trunks. I froze. The sound was distant, yet it pressed close, like it had slipped inside my own ears. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else. Something patient. Something waiting. The fog swirled around my legs. Every movement made the damp air cling tighter to my skin. I swallowed. My heartbeat thundered against my ribs. I took a careful step. The laugh returned, closer this time, yet still beyond reach. It curled around the silence, filling the spaces between the trees. Branches shivered overhead. Leaves rustled softly, not with wind, but with the sense of presence. I paused again. My fingers brushed wet bark. I tried to anchor myself to the ground. The laugh followed. It wasn't playful. It wasn't cruel. It was just there, waiting. The fog thickened. Shadows stretched long and thin along the trail. Each one seemed to twitch with the echo of that laugh. I tilted my head, trying to locate it, but the sound shifted, slipping from tree to tree, vanishing when I tried to focus. My chest tightened. The forest felt alive. It leaned in around me. Every footstep seemed mirrored, every rustle just behind me. I whispered into the fog. A soft, meaningless sound. The laugh answered. Closer now, and farther away. Impossible. The damp air clung to my hair. The scent of pine mixed with a faint metallic tang. I felt a brush at my shoulder, or thought I did. The laugh lingered, hollow and patient. I moved forward slowly, boots sinking into wet leaves. The fog swirled around my knees, rising higher with every step. The laugh wrapped around the silence again. It wasn't following me. It was waiting for me to notice. Shadows leaned into the trail. Branches trembled. The forest whispered in a language I didn't know. The sound of my own breath grew loud, ragged. I tried to shake the feeling, but the hollow echo pressed against my chest, against my skin, against the inside of my skull. Every step brought it closer. Or maybe I was moving closer to it. I couldn't tell. The fog had swallowed any sense of distance. I stopped. The laugh settled into a single, drawn-out note, resonating with the mist. It felt like the forest was breathing with it, watching me with unseen eyes. I pressed my hands to the wet leaves at my sides. The cold ran through my fingers. I inhaled slowly, trying to steady my racing pulse. The laugh softened, drifting like smoke. The fog thinned just a little. The trail returned under pale light. The forest leaned back. Branches lifted slightly. I exhaled. The hollow laugh faded, leaving only silence and the sense that it lingered just beyond the mist, waiting, patient, always waiting. The fog hung thick, curling around every branch. Damp earth pressed into my boots. Cold air brushed my neck with each step. I walked slowly, trying to measure the distance ahead. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Then they came back. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, in unison with my own. I froze. My boots pressed harder into the wet leaves. The air smelled of damp pine and soil, but something else, metallic, like faint rust, lingered beneath. I stepped faster. So did the footsteps. I tried to run. They matched my pace exactly. Slower, faster, stopping when I did. I couldn't tell if I was chasing them or being led. The mist curled around my legs, soaking my socks. Branches pressed close, scraping against my shoulders. Every step I took felt mirrored. The forest was alive, watching. I whispered to myself, small and meaningless words, but the fog swallowed them before they left my lips. I tried to look back. Nothing but fog and the deep, dark trunks of trees. Yet the footsteps remained, echoing around me, sometimes soft, sometimes thudding in rhythm with my heart. I moved faster. The fog thickened. Cold droplets clung to my hair, dripped down my neck. The rhythm of the footfalls quickened. I could feel the pressure of their presence behind me. Or was it ahead? The path curved. Shadows bent into strange, unrecognizable shapes. Every time I tried to focus on one, it dissolved. The footsteps continued, guiding me, or chasing me. I couldn't tell. I stopped. So, did they? Silence pressed in. My breath sounded too loud. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Then I moved again. Careful steps. The footfalls resumed. Softer now, yet deliberate, like a finger tracing the outline of my fear. I realized I wasn't alone. Not in the way I had thought. The forest itself was moving with me. It was shaping the path, leading me. Leaves brushed against my arms as I walked. The fog smelled wetter, thicker, almost sweet. I could feel it curling around my ankles, tugging at my boots, urging me forward. I tried to quicken my pace. The footsteps quickened too. Every step I took, every pause matched perfectly. I stopped again. The forest held its breath. Then I noticed it, the faintest pull, like a tug on my spine, guiding me to the pale light and shadows. The fog swirled around me, thickening with every movement. Rustling leaves whispered in tandem with the footfalls. I couldn't see who or what was guiding me, but I felt the rhythm, felt the weight of unseen eyes. I tried to run. Boots slipped on wet leaves. Branches scraped against my arms. The footsteps continued, unwavering. They weren't following me. They were leading. The path curved again. I felt the pull more strongly now, deeper into the fog. The forest presence pressed against my chest. A soft hum, like breath moving through trees, accompanied the rhythm of the footfalls. I took a slow, deliberate step, and then another. The fog parted just enough to reveal the faint outline of the trail ahead. The footsteps slowed, then stopped entirely. Silence returned. My boots pressed into wet leaves. The fog hung heavy, and I realized the forest had guided me. It wasn't chasing me. It wasn't punishing me. It had been leading me, always leading, always waiting for me to follow. I exhaled slowly. The rhythm of the footfalls faded into memory. The fog curled around me one last time, soft and heavy, as if the forest had exhaled too. And then I walked forward, alone, but not quite. The echo of footsteps lingered, just beneath the mist. The forest was quiet. Fog hugged the trunks and crept along the forest floor. Damp leaves pressed against my boots. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, heavy with the chill of approaching night. Each breath hung in front of me like a pale ghost. I stopped. Something moved in the shadows at ground level, a shimmer, almost like reflected light, and then dozens of glowing eyes blinked at me. They were low to the ground, not human, not quite animal, small, large, some so close I felt their heat in the cool air. I froze. The mist swirled between us, softly brushing my skin, wet and cold against my neck. They blinked in unison, then vanished. The darkness returned. A whisper followed, soft, drawn out, almost musical. It urged me to stay, to watch, to listen. I tried to move, but my boots felt heavy, rooted to the damp soil. The forest leaned closer, branches pressing against my shoulders. The eyes returned, emerging from the fog like scattered lanterns, blinking in time with something I couldn't name. I shivered. The mist curled around my calves, clingy, almost alive. A faint hum pulsed through the air, vibrating through my chest. The whispers pressed closer. I couldn't tell if they came from the eyes or from the trees themselves. I took a careful step. The eyes followed. Even when I moved faster, they mirrored me, blinking, disappearing, reappearing. The forest smelled wetter now, damp soil and the faint tang of something metallic. I pressed my hands to the trunks, feeling the rough bark beneath my fingers. I realized the whisper wasn't just sound. It was suggestion, a gentle pull, urging me forward, toward the patch of mist where the eyes lingered. I stopped again. They blinked, slower this time, as if measuring me, counting my breaths. The fog swirled higher. Every shadow bent slightly, shivering in time with the eyes. The hum grew, low and steady, vibrating inside my skull. I wanted to look away, but the pull kept me rooted, to watch, to wait. A single step. The eyes blinked twice. The whisper pressed against my ears. Stay. Watch. Listen. The mist wrapped around my ankles, cold, damp, almost protective. The forest seemed to hold its breath with me, leaning in, attentive. I felt a flicker of warmth among the eyes, as if some part of them invited me closer. But instinct told me to retreat, to pull away from the hypnotic glow. Yet I couldn't. The forest, the fog, the eyes, the whisper, all drew me forward slowly, carefully, step by step, until the edges of the clearing blurred. I exhaled softly. The glow faded into the fog. The whisper sank back into silence. The forest remained, waiting. Every tree leaned just a little closer. Every shadow trembled softly. And I knew, even when the eyes were gone, the forest had watched, and it would watch again. The fog hung heavy, curling around every tree trunk. Leaves clung damply to my boots. Cold air pressed against my face, thick and unyielding. The forest smelled of wet earth and pine resin. A faint metallic tang lingered beneath the dampness. Each breath felt visible, hanging pale in front of me. Then I felt it, a cold breath on my neck. No wind stirred, no movement near me, yet the chill pressed against my skin, brushing softly, deliberately. I froze. Every nerve stood alert. The fog swirled unnaturally, thickening around my shoulders. It seemed to lean toward me, curling like fingers through the air. I whirled around. Nothing. Empty trunks, pale light, drifting mist. Silence pressed against my ears. Yet the feeling remained, a presence pressing close, unseen, patient. My skin prickled. Goosebumps rose along my arms. The cold pressed deeper into my bones, and the damp air clung to my hair. I took a careful step. The fog seemed to shift with me. Rustling leaves whispered faintly. I could feel it moving just behind me, yet every glance revealed nothing. A breath again, closer this time, curling along my collarbone. I spun. Empty forest. Shadows stretched unnaturally. Branches bent as if leaning in to watch. The hum of the earth beneath my boots seemed louder. Each heartbeat echoed, pulsing through my chest, through my limbs, matching some slow, unseen rhythm. I whispered to myself. The sound vanished instantly, swallowed by the heavy fog. The presence lingered, patient, silent, yet undeniably there. The mist thickened to my waist. Cold droplets clung to my clothes, scented faintly with moss and wet bark. I shivered. Every instinct screamed to move, but my legs felt heavy, weighed down by the fog itself. The breath returned, brushing the back of my neck. I flinched. It did not retreat. It pressed closer. A soft static hummed through the air, vibrating along the wet earth. I spun slowly, searching for some clue, some glimpse of what was there. The forest remained empty. The shadows stretched, twisted, unyielding. Yet the sense of something close was undeniable. I moved forward. Every step made the fog swirl around my ankles, curling up like pale smoke. The presence followed, pressing, brushing against me, never seen, never revealed. Leaves rustled faintly to my left. Branches shivered above. The cold pressed along my neck again, lingering, and I realized I was not alone. Not in shape or form, but in pressure and breath, in the very air around me. I stopped. The fog still swirled, curling toward me. The silence of the forest was thick, but beneath it, a low hum vibrated. I could feel it resonate in my chest, in my jaw, in the soles of my boots. The presence lingered, patient, waiting, close enough to feel, far enough to remain unseen. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath with me. I exhaled slowly. The cold receded slightly. The mist thinned. The path returned under pale, muted light. I continued, each step careful, measured. The memory of the breath pressed along my spine, soft but undeniable, a reminder that some things a forest watch, wait, and move unseen, always near. The trees thinned. Fog hung low, curling around roots and trunks. The air smelled faintly of wet moss and pine. A clearing opened before me, empty, bathed in pale, almost silver light. The ground was soft underfoot, damp but firm. I paused. The silence was heavy, pressing against my ears. No rustling leaves, no distant calls, just quiet, thick and tangible. For a moment, I felt safe, alone yet untouched. The fog retreated slightly at the edges of the clearing, allowing the pale light to spread. But then I noticed the shadows. They were subtle at first, stretching thin across the clearing, moving almost imperceptibly. A flicker here, a twitch there, as if the light itself hesitated. The air shifted. A faint hum vibrated through the damp earth beneath my boots. I felt it in my chest, in my jaw, in the soles of my feet. The silence no longer felt like peace. It felt like a warning. The shadows crept inward, slow, deliberate, not cast by trees or uneven ground. Something else, almost sentient, watching, waiting. I breathed slowly. The fog swirled softly at my ankles. The clearing smelled wetter now, earthy and metallic, like soil pressed under rain. I stepped forward carefully. Soft footsteps against damp earth. The light remained pale, almost comforting. Yet the edges darkened, shadows bending, twisting. The silence pressed harder. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and loud in the hollow of my chest. The hum grew faintly, mingling with the quiet, like the forest itself exhaled slowly around me. The shadows shifted closer, stretching, curling, almost reaching. I wanted to run, but my legs felt rooted, caught in the soft soil. The fog drifted in tendrils, brushing my skin, cold and damp, carrying a faint scent of pine and decay. The light did not fade, but it no longer felt like protection. It felt like exposure. I exhaled, letting the quiet fill my lungs. Each breath echoed softly across the clearing. The shadows paused, lingering at the edges, just beyond the pale glow. The clearing seemed alive, waiting, observing. Even as I stepped slowly forward, the edges crept closer, patient, deliberate. I felt my skin prickle. The air thicken around me, wet and clinging, silent but watching. For a moment, I dared to feel calm again. But the shadows moved with intent. The fog swirled higher. The light remained pale, soft, but the forest whispered beneath it. I continued through the clearing, each step careful, measured. The shadows followed, always at the edge, almost sentient, and I knew that my brief feeling of safety had been an illusion. Even in the quiet, the forest breathed. The shadows waited. And the clearing was never truly empty. The forest shifted around me. Fog curled between trunks like smoke. The damp air clung to my skin, cold and heavy. Leaves whispered. At first, I thought it was wind, but the sound had rhythm, cadence, almost words. I paused. The trunk seemed closer, leaning in. The branches murmured faintly, softly, forming sentences I could almost understand. Each breath I drew felt thick, drawn with the air itself. The scent of wet earth mixed with pine resin, sharp and alive. The mist swirled around my ankles, brushing cold against my legs. I moved forward, slow, deliberate. The forest hummed with quiet energy. The murmuring trees bent and swayed, as if keeping time with some invisible rhythm. The words teased me, not clear, yet familiar, dangerous, compelling. I felt drawn deeper. The fog thickened, curling higher along my calves. The hum pulsed faintly beneath my boots, through the soil. Roots twitched beneath the earth, subtle, almost imperceptible. The forest seemed to breathe in unison with me. Every inhalation echoed in the mist. Every step released faint rustles, echoing along trunks and fallen branches. The murmuring grew louder, phrases twisting in the fog. I could feel them in my chest, in my temples, pulling me forward, deeper, always deeper. Shadows shifted along the edges of the fog. They bent unnaturally, curling toward me, like the forest itself was leaning in to watch. I tried to stop. The words, the hum, the rhythm pressed closer. A soft static filled my ears, vibrating faintly through the damp air. I shivered. The mist clung like silk to my hair and face. I felt the pull stronger, drawn to a path unseen. The trees whispered in low, sibilant tones, their voices wrapping around my thoughts. I wanted to resist, but each step forward felt inevitable. The soil pressed softly beneath my boots, alive with hums, thrum, subtle vibration. The forest grew more oppressive, yet strangely inviting. Each murmured phrase pulled at me, like memory I could not name. The fog drifted higher, brushing my shoulders, a faint metallic tang in the air, mixing with wet moss and the smell of decomposing leaves. The forest whispered constantly, breathing with intention, alive. I stumbled forward, guided by sound and shadow. The murmuring trees bent closer, their cadence hypnotic, inescapable. I felt their rhythm seep into my chest, slow, deep, unavoidable. The clearing ahead remained unseen. Only the fog, only the hum, only the pull, irresistible. I moved without thinking, each step answering the forest's quiet summons. The whispers grew intricate, almost coherent. I understood and did not. The branches brushed my face, soft, damp. The roots twitched underfoot, faint pressure, warning, or invitation. I could feel the forest intent pressing around me, dense, patient, alive. The words lingered in my mind, dangerous and enthralling. I was caught between calm and tension, drawn deeper into the heart of the murmuring forest, where every leaf, every shadow, every breath watched, waited, and pulled. I exhaled slowly. The fog swirled. The murmuring softened, yet the pull remained. I took another step, and the forest welcomed me further into its quiet, dangerous rhythm. The fog thickened around me. Each step pressed soft into wet earth. My breath curled in the cold, damp air. At the edge of vision, shadows lingered, tall, thin, unmoving. I felt them before I saw them. The forest held a hush, waiting. Leaves whispered faintly, brushing against one another. The air smelled of moss, wet wood, and something older. I froze. The figures did not move. They did not approach, did not retreat. A shiver ran down my spine. The fog swirled gently, brushing my cheeks. Yet their attention pressed heavily, patient, quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud, echoing in the mist. Soft rustles of small creatures elsewhere reminded me I was not alone. But these shapes were different. I dared not look directly. When I did, the edges of their forms blurred into fog, shadows melting, folding back into themselves. The forest held its breath. The damp air pressed into my clothes, clinging, dampening my skin. I could feel static in the silence, faint tingling in my scalp. They watched. I walked slowly, careful not to step too loudly, yet my footsteps seemed loud in the stillness. The fog curled at their feet, and for a moment it seemed to pulse with their presence. A soft, almost imperceptible hum filled the air, layered beneath the rustling leaves. I felt the pressure of their gaze on my back. Even when I dared to glance to the side, cold seeped into my bones. The earth beneath my feet felt hollow, alive. Time seemed to stretch. I moved a step, then another. The shadows remained, patient, unmoving, silent. I breathed slowly, tasting damp air and the faint metallic tang of fog. The shapes were always at the periphery, never closer, never fading. I wanted to speak, but the forest swallowed my voice. Even a whisper felt intrusive here. The soft scent of decay mingled with pine. A leaf dropped near my foot with muffled thud. It sounded impossibly loud, startling in the quiet. I realized I was being measured. Each movement I made was noted. Each breath drawn felt acknowledged. I tried to retreat, step back. The shapes did not change. The fog seemed thicker, heavier, almost aware. I stopped completely. The forest hushed around me. The hum faded into near silence, leaving only the weight of unseen eyes. A faint rustle passed behind me. I held still, listening. Nothing moved, yet I was certain I was not alone. The figures remained, patient and indifferent, edges blending with fog, presence pressing on my chest and shoulders. I exhaled slowly. Cold air filled my lungs, fog brushing my hair. The shapes at the edge of the mist did not shift. They were waiting, and I was caught in their patient attention. Alone, I took another tentative step forward. The fog curled at my ankles. My shadow stretched thin over wet leaves. The forest waited with me, and the figures lingered at the edge, silent, patient, eternal. The forest thinned. A pale fog clung to the trunks, soft and cold. Every step pressed quietly into damp earth. Ahead, a stone wall rose from the moss. Carved into it, a door, small, impossible, pulsing faintly with a pale light. The air vibrated. A hum, low and steady, mingled with the forest. It felt alive, breathing in rhythm with my own heartbeat. I stepped closer. My fingers brushed cold stone. It pulsed beneath my touch, almost like it had a pulse of its own. I hesitated. The hum inside the door sang with the fog, a rhythm that pressed against my chest. The forest felt still around me. Leaves paused mid-fall, Rustling hushed as if listening. I crouched slightly, drawn toward it. Curiosity and fear twisted inside me. The stone smelled of wet earth and something older hidden. The hum grew softer, subtle, vibrating through my bones. I could feel the fog pressing closer, curling around my ankles, moving as if alive. I wanted to step back, but the light, the pulsing, it called me. My shadow stretched over wet leaves. I felt the weight of the unseen, watching, patient. A shiver ran down my spine. I placed my hand flat on the door. Warmth seeped through stone, or maybe it was a hum inside. The forest around me shifted. Fog thickened at the edges of my vision, making the path behind me disappear. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. Yet something deeper pressed me forward. A faint static hum beneath the tone, like the trees themselves were vibrating in harmony with the door. The rhythm matched my own breath, and I felt dizzy, unsteady, as if the ground itself had melted. I knelt before it, tracing the carvings, impossible symbols, flowing, familiar yet unknown. The hum seemed to respond, like I had spoken without moving my lips. A soft, earthy scent rose from the cracks in stone. It smelled of rain-soaked roots, moss, and something metallic. The hum pulsed stronger, aligning with my heartbeat. I stepped back, hesitant. The door did not move, but its presence pressed into me, persistent. I wondered how long it had been here, if it had waited for me, or if it simply existed, patient, indifferent. The fog thickened further, brushing my hair, my cheeks. The forest seemed to breathe around me, and the door pulsed in time with that invisible rhythm. I crouched again. The hum drew me closer, and I could almost hear whispers inside, soft, beckoning, curling in the fog. I wanted to touch it, to open it, to know what lived inside that stone heartbeat. But fear held me back. I realized curiosity and dread were entangled, each feeding the other. The hum softened. The fog swirled lazily at my feet. I took a hesitant step away. The forest seemed to sigh, the hum fading into the stillness. The door pulsed faintly, patient and silent once more. I exhaled slowly. The cold clung to my skin. The damp soil smelled of moss and stone. I turned, leaving the impossible door behind, its pulse lingering in my chest, its hum still echoing in the fog. I walked back into the trees, the forest quiet, yet somehow changed. The door waited, and I knew it would remember. The forest was quiet. Fog clung low to the ground, cold against my ankles. The air smelled of damp moss and wet soil. Then it began, a pulse deep beneath my feet. Slow at first, barely felt, then stronger, insistent. I froze. Each vibration traveled through my soles, up my legs, settling in my chest. Shadows bent around me. Trees stretched unnaturally, their bark twisting as if breathing. I could feel the rhythm in my bones, like the earth itself had a heartbeat. The pulse repeated, slow, steady, then faster, uneven, uncertain. I knelt to touch the ground. The soil was soft, almost yielding. Roots quivered under my hands, tiny tendrils moving as if alive. A hum rose from the forest floor, subtle, vibrating in harmony with the pulse. It pressed against my ears, filled my head with quiet pressure. I took a step back. Shadows writhed, bending toward me and away, following the pulse in silent, eerie choreography. The fog thickened, curling between trees like smoke. The air smelled faintly of iron and earth. Each breath I drew felt heavy, full of the pulse beneath. I tried to lift my foot. It landed with the rhythm. Each step echoed the heartbeat, each shadow twisting in response. The pulse grew stronger. I could feel it in my spine, in the muscles of my neck and shoulders. The forest seemed to lean closer, breathing with me, moving with me. I wanted to run, but my body refused. The ground pulled at me, the vibrations anchoring me in place. I crouched, hands pressed to the earth. A whisper of wind rustled leaves above. I could hear it matching the pulse, a soft rhythm that seemed alive, sentient. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision. They were not static. They twisted and warped with each beat, faces appearing briefly, then melting into darkness. I shivered. The pulse slowed, then sped up again, forcing my heart to catch in time with the earth. I felt dizzy, unsteady. but somehow drawn to the rhythm. The fog pressed against my cheeks, cool and damp. Every breath I took seemed to echo with the pulse, as if my lungs were part of it. I lifted my hands from the soil. Roots twitched beneath my fingers. I could feel them searching, stretching like living veins. The forest itself seemed aware of me. Leaves rustled without wind. Branches bent slightly, casting moving shadows that mirrored the pulse beneath. I took a tentative step forward. The vibration followed, insistent. The ground thrummed, the roots stirred, the shadows bent. A strange calm settled over me. The pulse was steady again, soft but alive, like the earth was watching, breathing, waiting. I closed my eyes, felt the rhythm in my chest, felt the forest pulse through me. For a moment, fear and awe were the same. Then I stepped back. The pulse receded slightly. The shadows shifted slower. The fog thinned just enough for me to see my path. I exhaled. The earth beneath my feet was silent again, but I could still feel the memory of it in my bones. The forest watched, patient, and I walked on, carrying the pulse beneath me with every step. The fog lay thick, softening the edges of the forest. Cold air brushed my cheeks. Damp earth pressed under my boots. Then they appeared, pale figures, indistinct at first, shapes hovering at the edge of vision. I stopped. They did not move closer, nor did they retreat. They simply waited. I strained to see. Their outlines shimmered in the gray light, blurring with the mist. I could not tell if they were watching me or waiting for me to join them. The air smelled faintly of rain and moss. Each breath felt heavier than the last. A soft seemed to vibrate through fog, or perhaps it was my own heartbeat echoing. I took a step forward. The figures blurred, twisting like smoke. When I moved again, they were gone. Only fog remained. A silence settled, thick and expectant. I could feel eyes, or what felt like eyes, tracking me from everywhere and nowhere. The ground was damp beneath my fingertips. Leaves rustled without wind. Shadows bent unnaturally along the trunks of the trees. I paused, shivering. The fog swirled around me, pulling at the corners of my vision, making the figures feel closer than they were. I tried to call out. A breath left my lips, cold and shallow, but it vanished into the mist. No reply came, only the soft, constant hum of silence. I moved again, cautiously. Shapes began to coalesce and fade, like reflections in rippling water. A hand, or the suggestion of one, seemed to reach for me, but vanished before I could touch it. The forest seemed alive. Rustling leaves, shifting shadows. Even the fog itself moved with intent. I could sense it watching, breathing with me. The figures appeared again, pale, waiting. A soft longing tugged at me, a curiosity I could not name. I wanted to step closer, to know if they were real or just a trick of mist and memory. But each time I approached, they dissipated into nothing, and the forest closed around me, dense, silent, infinite. I felt alone, yet something in the fog urged me forward, a gentle pull for the gray haze, toward shapes that vanished the moment I tried to hold them. The cold pressed against my shoulders. A faint scent of wet bark filled my nostrils. The figures lingered at the edge of sight, patient, unmoving, eternal. I let my hands brush the mist. It was cool, damp, almost solid in its weight. The forest hummed softly beneath my skin. I exhaled, slowly. The fog swallowed the figures again. Silence settled, heavy and complete. And yet I knew, if I waited long enough, they would return. I stepped forward once more, alone among the mist, carrying the memory of pale shapes that were always just out of reach. The fog pressed close, thick and unyielding. Each step felt heavier than the last. The forest leaned in quiet, listening. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft and certain, carrying my name across the still air. It was neither loud nor urgent. It was a call and a farewell. I paused. The earth beneath my feet seemed to shift. The soil hummed with something ancient. A cool dampness clung to my hands and face. I moved again, or perhaps I didn't. It felt as though the forest carried me, its unseen arms guiding to the gray haze. The trees loomed, their shadows long and still. Mist curled around their trunks, swirling in patterns I could almost understand. Each breath drew in cold fog. It settled in my lungs, weaving with the rhythm of my heartbeat. I could feel the presence everywhere, not just around me, but inside me, pressing softly against my chest. The whisper came again, closer this time, tender, patient. I didn't resist. The air shimmered with movement, though nothing solid appeared. Shadows shifted, bending toward me, and the forest exhaled. Time seemed to stretch. Moments drifted, slow as mist over the earth. I was neither walking nor standing. I was simply moving. The fog clung to my skin. Damp hair tickled my cheeks. A faint hum pulsed beneath the soil, sinking with my bones. I could feel the ground, and yet I was not touching it. The forest carried me with silent precision. No fear, no struggle, only quiet surrender. I reached a small clearing. Pale light pooled there, soft, diffused, almost welcoming. Shadows curled at the edges, watching, patient. The whisper softened into silence, and in that silence, I realized I was no longer alone, not in the way of fear, but in a careful, encompassing presence. I could feel the forest breathing with me, its rhythm slow, deliberate, the mist pressed against my face, cool and intimate. I exhaled, letting it flow through me. Every step, every pulse of the earth, carried me deeper into stillness. The fog wrapped tighter, a cocoon of gray and quiet. For a moment, I could have resisted, but resistance felt unnecessary. The forest, the mist, the whisper that bore my name, they were part of me now, and I of them. The light shifted, pale and tender. Shadows retreated just enough to leave a path unseen. I walked, or was carried, through it with ease. I exhaled once more, letting the fog fill my lungs. The whisper faded, soft as falling leaves, and I understood this was not an ending, nor a beginning. It was simply being, alone yet enveloped, moving yet still. I let the forest guide me, and followed the last whisper into the gray, eternal calm. The night stretches on, thick fog coils around the trees. Branches sway, though no wind stirs. Shadows fold into the gray, sliding over roots and fallen leaves. I cannot tell where they end or where I begin. The earth hums beneath me, a low, steady vibration that resonates through my bones. I try to step forward. The path dissolves beneath my feet. Backward, nothing but the same dense fog. It is endless, yet still I move. Shadows pulse softly, mirroring my breath, shifting with the rhythm of the unseen. They fold over themselves, and I feel myself folding too. I am silent, not from fear, but because speaking feels irrelevant here. Every word would vanish in the mist before leaving my lips. The forest watches, though nothing solid looks back. Every shadow, every curve of fog, holds its own quiet awareness. I reach a hollow between two ancient trunks. The darkness there is deeper than before, yet I am not afraid. I am part of it. A quiet pulse flows through me, matching the pulse of the earth beneath. Leaves rustle softly, as if breathing, and I breathe with them. Every inhalation pulls a mist, cold, damp, and endless. Every exhalation merges me further into gray expanse. I hear nothing, yet I feel everything. The hum beneath the soil, the distant bending of shadows, the faint tension in the air that suggests awareness without form. I stop, and the fog stops with me. I step again, and it ripples around me, as if testing my presence. Time unravels. Moments stretch and fold. A flicker of pale light drifts through branches, too soft to illuminate and too deliberate to ignore. I move through it, or it moves through me. I cannot tell which. Each step leaves no trace. Each breath becomes part of the mist. The night deepens. Shadows press closer, wrapping, enfolding, not with malice, but with quiet inevitability. I listen to the silence. It hums in rhythm with the heartbeat underfoot, with a slow folding of fog over shadows, with my own merging into this place. There is no fear here, only awareness. I am alone, and yet I am everywhere. The forest exhales. Mist swirls around me, and I swirl with it. The trees bend slightly, shapes shifting, forming vague suggestions of eyes, of faces, of nothing at all. I feel no urgency, no need to escape, no need to move. I am weightless and grounded. A shadow among shadows, a breath within the fog. Time ceases. There is only the hum, the pulse, the folding gray that envelopes me completely. I turn, yet see nothing. I step, yet leave no path. I speak, yet hear only silence. I am part of it now. The fog, the shadows, the night that stretches endlessly. And I understand. I am alone. I am silent. I am eternal. The mist coils around me, cold and soft, pressing with the quiet patience of the forest. I breathe with it. I move with it. I am nothing. I am everything. Alone among shadows. Forever.